Business Connections Live, the UK's leading online business channel. This is Business Connections Live with Steve Hyland.
Hello and welcome to Business Connections Live, the program for entrepreneurs, SMEs and business owners. Now, on today's show, we're going to be discussing professional B2B selling and sales leadership. In the past, we've talked a lot about the selling techniques that are out there, how you should go about it. But today, we're going to be looking at a more high level. How do organizations and companies, how do they sort of step back for a moment and get maybe sometimes the right sales professionals? And what should you be expecting from them? How can you maybe support them and make them the professionals that you need for your business? Join me on today's program is Jeff Downs. He's the Managing Director of Quantum Sales. Jeff, lovely to have you with us. Selling, we talk a lot about selling, and I often say this, it's the cornerstone of any business. How important do you see it to organisations, and do you think they're getting it right?
Well, I see it as absolutely vital in terms of maximising shareholder value, but also in terms of maximising the potential of individuals. And if you get it right, you know, in a sense, it makes the rest of the marketing effort so much easier. You know, it's a bit like in a football team. If you've got a couple of good strikers, the midfield doesn't have to be quite so good.
And that's what it's really all about, isn't it? Because it's the part of the business that can be bringing the money in.
Yes.
And in your experience, when you go out there and you talk to organisations about structuring, you're a bit like the England manager, aren't you? But you go out there and you talk to them about, hopefully not, structuring their actual sales team. You must see a number of different or the same mistakes coming up time and time again.
Yes, we do. In looking at selling operations in the B2B space from top to bottom, it's surprisingly common actually, both in terms of the strategic planning and the direction of the sales force from above, and in terms of what salespeople actually do on the ground. And there's no template for it in terms of feedback, but you'll be very, very surprised how common the areas are in terms of where the areas for improvement are.
So would you say then that, because you talk to a lot of salespeople and you'll say to them, okay, your on target earnings are going to be this, just go out there, sell the product, you just get on with it.
Yeah.
Is there more to it than just hiring somebody, bringing them into the organisation, getting them familiar with what the product is that you're selling and then pushing them out on the road? Is there a bigger plan when it comes to developing your sales teams?
Well, of course, because for a start, there are some superstars out there who will probably go and do a good job and perform well no matter what. But the fact is that most salespeople will regress to mediocrity unless they're managed properly. so if you leave,
keep poking them with a sharp stick.
Well, I wouldn't say that either, and perhaps we'll come back to that. But certainly they need managing, and more importantly, they need leading to fulfil their potential, so they can in turn get the very best results for their company. And actually, to leave a good performing salesperson alone is probably one of the most common mistakes that we see, because very often, even if they are extremely talented, everybody reaches the stage whereby they work, you know, very hard the first couple of years, then they start to ease off, maybe don't, you know, knock on so many new doors to win new business, relax back into looking after existing customers, you know, collecting the kids from school on a Friday maybe, or something like that.
Somebody once said to me that when you're looking for a salesperson, I mean, how do you judge, how do you decide it's going to be the right salesperson for you? Are you looking for experience? And somebody said that somebody can come to you and go, I've had 20 years of sales experience, but it may well be 20 of the first years of sales experience. Yes. He hasn't grown, he hasn't developed, he's in a bit of a rut, he does it the same way year in, year out. Do you see that?
Very much so. The syndrome of 1 year's experience 20 times over. And I think in any case, when somebody is coming new into an organisation, you know, what history is history. They have sold a certain product in a certain market with a certain platform in terms of contacts, and they may well have done extremely well in that environment. But bringing them into a new environment unless you plan what needs to happen and what they need to do and importantly what they need to be like in terms of their attitude. Likelihood is that mistakes will actually be made. And a kind of corollary of that is that organisations sometimes insist on hiring salespeople only from their industry. So they go fishing.
So there's no freshness.
There's no freshness. They go fishing in the same ponds all the time. And some industries we've found are extremely incestuous, and the hiring that goes on is all within the same industry. So thus, no freshness, no raising of the game.
Is it nature or nurture, do you think, when it comes to sales professionals? Are they born salesperson, or can you teach them, or is everybody got the potential to be a sales professional with the right training?
Well, are there any born brain surgeons is what I think about when I'm asked that question.
I've had a dabble.
You've had a dabble, but you probably wouldn't want to be operated on yourself by somebody like that. So of course some people have got more natural ability than others, but in the main, a bit like great leaders, 1% can do it through charisma. The rest have to be nurtured, have to be developed to bring the best out of them, and technique needs to be applied to get the best.
Well, before we get on to the nitty-gritty of all of this, and we really get down to the difference between B2B selling, B2C selling, how to go about what the responsibilities are for the sales force when they're out there, and what the responsibilities of the company are to their sales force. Let's find out a bit about you. So you're just a woodworker, aren't you? No, you're not. But, I mean, what does your company do? What do you do, and how did you get into this whole arena?
Yeah, so we are B2B sales improvers. We go into organisations in the SME space and also in the corporate space as well as it happens, and we go in and work out what the gaps are in terms of what the sales force are doing now, compare that with the sales and marketing strategy of the business and what the sales team needs to be doing, hold up the mirror and say these are the gaps against best practice, these are our recommendations on what needs to change, and therefore this is the program we recommend to close those gaps.
As you drive away after your first meeting, do you find yourself rolling your eyes because here you are again, it's Groundhog Day, the same mistakes by a different business, by a different company? I mean, do you see similarities between the way different businesses do operate?
Well, businesses clearly are all different, but there are some similarities in terms of some of the, if you like, gaps in terms of best practice. What
do you reckon the biggest surprise is? Well, something you've become accustomed to, but what do you think the biggest mistake can be that businesses are doing?
I think the big one is trying to manage by results rather than managing sales activity. What I mean by that is if you manage by a result, that's always history and you can't do anything about it.
Oh, right, yes.
And yet, boardrooms around the country, probably today, will be sitting there reviewing the numbers for last quarter, looking at the trends, looking at the conversions, but that's history.
So 2020 hindsight, while it's great information, isn't the way you should be managing tomorrow.
Correct. Clearly, the information and data is useful for planning tomorrow, but there's no point in just spending time on analysing what has happened, or indeed using it as some sort of platform for just saying, okay, we need 15% growth, so we'll give a 15% hike in sales targets and maybe put an incentive scheme in. We call that management by hope, by the way. Is this going to happen? Oh yeah, we hope so. Yeah.
So are there strategies then that businesses can put in? I mean, it must be very difficult, because now what we're saying is that it's management by crystal ball, isn't it?
Yes.
We are looking into the future and we are making a Mystic Meg prediction to see what is just around the corner.
Yes.
How do you put that? Because I'm sure if I went into my bank, because that's what they're after, isn't it? You talk to the bank, you talk about overdrafts, and you talk about loans and business loans. Yeah. Suppose they are actually looking for those forward-thinking figures, but the only thing to support it is retrospective information.
Yeah, they might ask, or an investor might ask about what's in your pipeline and what are you forecasting from the pipeline. But that's not the same as a planning and managing of activity and saying, okay, what activity got us our result last quarter, and what activity do we need to achieve the result in the next quarter, What does that mean in terms of the behaviours of salespeople and sales leaders to make that happen? And most organisations don't do that.
So when you go in and you're talking to a CEO or a managing director of a large organisation, do you come up against resistance to this different way of thinking about how to increase sales, or is it quite common sense to these people? Once it's said, like the genie is out of the bottle, they go, yeah, we understand where you're coming from. We understand what you're trying to get at.
Very much so, actually. When you feed these things back, almost like common sense in boxes, everybody around the boardroom table or the business owner, that makes a lot of sense. What do we need to do about it? When you drop down a level to the sales leadership, sales management level, there may be some vested interest, and you may have to overcome some resistance to change to get those guys on board, because if they're not on board, you're not going to execute change at the sharp end. So clearly that has to happen. But once those two things are in place, top table commitment and then management leadership commitment, the hardest job then is getting people on the ground to change behaviour. That's very difficult, because if somebody's been used to selling certain products to certain types of customers every day, and now policy is dictating they have to now, instead of going down the road on a Monday morning turning left at the traffic lights, they have to go down the road and turn right, and then sell products they don't know to people who may not like them. That's one hell of a challenge, and we have to recognise that at a human level. Salespeople are human like the rest of us, and they need help in making those changes.
Okay, well listen, we're going to come back and we're going to work our way through all the processes that we're talking here. Maybe just some advice. If you are maybe a manager in charge of a reasonable size sales force at the moment, how are you motivating them, and how are you able to get them, bring those sales in? It's more to come with my guest today, Jeff Downs from Quantum Sales on Business Connections Live. Well, you're watching Business Connections Live. We're live, as we are, every Monday. And don't forget, you can always tune in. You can watch us on YouTube, or you can also watch us on Facebook as well, for that matter. There's over 200 hours worth of great sales information. Well, sales, marketing, social media, you name it. If you want business information, if you're a startup, if you're an established company, and you want to talk and hear to some of the experts that we've had on our programs, then simply go to our website, businessconnectionslive.com, and check out some of our catch-up pages as well, for that matter. Good opportunity actually to look back at last week's program, and a real cracking show we had. It was all about LinkedIn. Is LinkedIn a good place for you to be going? Is LinkedIn a great place to be growing future sales? That's what we've just been talking about. Should you be looking back and looking at where you got your previous sales calls from, or should you be using LinkedIn to develop new contacts that you can go down the route and then generate more sales? My guest on last week's show was Rupert Honeywood, and he had advice on how to find new clients on LinkedIn, also how to go about building a decent, a valuable database of new clients and prospects, and also how to cut your marketing costs as well. It was a great show. If you did miss it, I do suggest you go back and you watch it. If you did miss it though, and you just want a bit of a tease for it, well, here's what happened on last week's edition of Business Connections Live. Now, on today's show, we're going to be discussing how to find clients on LinkedIn. LinkedIn, yes, that's right. So is it just a souped up version of Facebook? Or is it a real proper marketing tool for your business? If you're a small business owner, can you prospect on it? If you're a large business owner, can you use LinkedIn to prospect? Well, I've got an expert with me in the studio today. His name is Rupert Honeywood. He's the Managing Director of Integrated Marketing Bureau.
First of all, it's a great way of getting market intelligence on particular businesses or organisations you want to connect with, but also it's a great way of actually trying to find clients as well. Bottom line is, if you, for example, are wanting to find another role or another job, your public profile is actually almost like having your public CV available online. But it's actually evolved into being something much more than that now, hence the very large sum of money paid by Microsoft. One of the things you've got to bear in mind is you're always dealing with individuals. One of the worst things that people can do on LinkedIn is to overtly try and sell. It's very much a relationship building. But fundamentally, LinkedIn is a business-to-business platform, which of course includes business to social enterprises and to charities as well. Where it probably works best is where companies or organisations have got fairly high value products or services they actually want to sell. Because obviously to nurture and inform relationships, to build momentum takes time. So the top 50% are the ones which are fairly easy to get at, for example, by using LinkedIn, some of the advanced search techniques. What you'll find as part of any form of marketing campaign, though, is there's two main aspects. One is you want to nurture those relationships so they become part of the 7% and 3%, so they want to buy your stuff finally. But the other thing is what you will find is that you will start to reach the 3% and 7% are just part of the normal process. So social selling really is very much more about building on the relationship and getting people to the point where they're actually really interested in having a conversation. You need to obviously focus on the building the leads or the prospects to start with. Then you need to put a really strong prospect nurturing process in place. So it becomes much more of a consultative process. So for example, as a premium member, you get more sophisticated ability to be able to search. So if I click the advanced link at the top there, so for example, let's say you wanted to actually focus on certain industries, and let's say we were into computer and networking security space. We also decided we wanted to reach people at director, owner, partner and CXO level and also vice president level, and we select these options here. You can also do keyword searches as well. I won't do that now, but you can be quite specific with your keyword searches. So for example, if you wanted to reach business analysts, you could just search for business analysts in the keyword search or under job title. You can, of course, if you've met them through networking as well or know through other means, send a personal connection request. But I'd always recommend personalising that message. Never accept the LinkedIn default, because otherwise people may not remember you, but you may actually remember them for all sorts of reasons. So there's, again, a correct etiquette in terms of doing that. If you just remember you're communicating one person to another and are respectful about people, if you were to connect with a few people you don't know particularly well, providing you're respectful of that, you're unlikely to get any problems unless you just keep on connecting en masse with loads and loads of people. If you make sure all these parts are balanced, imagine a three-legged stool. If one of these parts aren't quite balanced, your business is going to struggle. If you make sure all three legs of your stool are even, and all those cogs are turning in tune, as it were, then you're going to get really good results. And the sales follow-up is where most businesses go wrong. People have almost forgotten how to use the telephone. And it's so important, that part, and building relationships. The great thing with LinkedIn, just remember it's a fantastic business-to-business platform. You've got very powerful search capabilities in there to find your ideal target client groups. Make sure you engage with people in the right way, treat people as individuals, build on those relationships, and crucially make sure you're very strong on the follow-up afterwards. Once you do start to have a really meaningful conversation, don't let those people go off the boil. Quite often we get very busy with stuff, the follow-through, the devil's always in the detail in terms of the follow-up.
A really great show, and don't forget there's a whole library of great programs there for you to watch at Business Connections Live. Incidentally, if you'd like to get in touch with us, you can do that very simply by dropping us an email. You can do that by going to studio@businessconnectionslive.com. If you want to have a word with us, if you'd like a show just like this one, we can brand it for you. We can make it look just like this. Put your logo up there on our big screen on the wall. If you'd like a show, maybe you want to talk to your sales team or your remote workforce, then all you've got to do is get in touch with us on that email address, or you can call us on 01784 256 777 and talk to myself or to Linda Bazan. And if you just want to follow our train of thought, that's the word I was desperately looking for, our train of thought, then you can follow us on our Twitter account, which is BCL Business TV. And don't forget Facebook as well. If you want to follow us on Facebook, then go to Business Connections Live on Facebook and do leave a comment there. Give us a thumbs up. Tell us what you think of the individual shows. You're watching Business Connections Live. Great to have your company as always. Joining me in the studio today is Jeff Downs, Managing Director of Quantum Sales. We're talking all about B2B sales, not B2C, but B2B. There is a bit of a difference. How would you define the difference between B2C and B2B?
In a sense, not very much. As if you think about the interface with the customer in terms of psychologically what goes on. I think probably in a B2C face-to-face environment, in a retail arena, for example, typically the conversations are much shorter. So your ability to make an impression, understand the customer's needs, and then.
I suppose it's you're reacting. It's quite a passive thing that's happening in B2C. They tend to be coming to you, and you tend to be selling an item. They tend to be buying.
By definition, they tend to be shoppers. Sometimes they're problem solvers as well, looking for a solution, and occasionally they are just browsing around. Of course,
and of course B2B, you're talking about corporate to corporate, aren't you?
Well, corporate to corporate, or small businesses to large corporates or global companies.
And do you think both the large businesses and the small businesses all make the same mistakes? Does it matter about size?
I think probably not. I think fundamentally the mistakes are the same. They just get scaled up and magnified, and probably last longer with the larger organisations, because it's like the dinosaur. You tap it on the towel and it takes a little while for it to reach the head.
They're thin at one end, fat in the middle, and thin at the other. That's my theory on dinosaurs. All right, you kind of alluded to this earlier on, and we've got a couple of sort of interesting areas when it comes to the whole process of B2B sales, and I suppose it starts at board level. What do you think the board should be thinking about to ensure that the selling operation is delivering shareholder value? And when we talk about shareholder value, how would you define shareholder value? Are they just looking for the bottom line, how much profits they make, or are they looking for integrity of the business, company growth, brand reputation? Is it all of those things that they should be considering?
Definitely, and different organisations package those things in different ways, and some are very proud at one end of saying we want to return X amount in shareholder value. Others say this is the purpose of our business, and you know what, that actually the return on investment doesn't matter as long as we fulfil our purpose, and many shades in between. Do
you think sometimes the shareholder level gets it wrong? I remember a couple of weeks back there was an article that I read in one of the newspapers that there is a real disconnect with shareholders because they're not looking at incorporating their employees into the business. They are no more than a resource for the business to make money with, and so therefore you kind of get this disconnect between board and employee.
It depends what you mean by a shareholder, really. I mean, obviously, with an SME, very often the shareholder is the managing director of the business, and maybe their other half, and they sit around the table and say, how much money are we making, and can we afford to go on holiday next year, kind of thing. Then at the other end, you've got the large, quoted companies where it's, the pension funds are investing in them, and the shareholders are a long way from, what's actually happening in each of those invested companies. But then in between, you've got shareholders who may be directors or employees, and who are, if you like, stakeholders in those businesses, who definitely have an interest in that business continuing to grow, continuing to make money for everybody involved.
So in that particular case, then, if we're looking at the board level, and I suppose we've got to talk in quite broad terms about the board level. What is the message that they should be communicating down to their sales team? Is it for them to do that, or at least to their sales manager? How would you say, look, you've got this multi-million-pound organisation, or you've got a multi-thousand-pound organisation, but the message that we want you to do is this: it can't be just go out there and sell more.
No.
So how do you construct that message? How do you go about sort of imparting the information on what you want them to achieve?
Well, I think, whether you are a CEO with a board of directors around you and then delegating through a sales management team, or whether you're the owner of an SME and you've got a sales manager reporting to you, the principle is exactly the same. And the first thing I would say is be very clear about what you want and what's the purpose of the selling operation. And of course that should emanate initially from the strategy of the company, but then the piece around sales and marketing. And then with regard to sales, what value do you want your selling operation to actually add? That's the question.
Well, it's a good question. So what would be the typical answer then?
Well, often in this changing world, there isn't clarity around it. So
that is the issue then.
It can be because if you look at the impact of the internet, for example, research shows now that 58% of all buying decisions are made before they meet the salesperson. Right? So it's based on the research. So if the information these days is being gathered using the web, then what's the added value of the salesperson? These are fundamental questions that need to be answered. So likewise, what's the role of the salesperson in terms of, is it looking after existing customers? Or is it going to win new ones? Or is it a combination of the two? And if so, what's the balance between those two things? Is it a question of just protecting existing business? And is it all about building a strong personal relationship so that somebody would feel guilty about changing their supplier? I don't know.
So do you see that? I mean, you within your organisation, when you go out and you talk to businesses, so what are you looking for? Are you looking to identify those individual traits, those individual market segments, so that you understand? I mean, it's interesting that, to build a relationship. But ultimately, isn't this just all about sales, regardless of how it works its way through? If you're going out there, even though the internet is intrinsic to the sales process, if you've got a sales team, if you've got somebody called the salesman, you expect them to be a salesman.
Yeah. What have they got to do? And all I'm saying is be absolutely clear about that, because if it's about protecting an existing relationship, you may want to hire or develop or retain people who have a profile whereby they're very good and capable of that. But if they need to be a hybrid salesperson with some new business and looking after existing, that's slightly different. Likewise, if it's purely looking after key accounts, it might be completely different.
Well, in that case then, if we look at that whole model conversely, should we say you go looking for an example, I suppose, if you go into an organisation, do you sometimes see that at board level what they do, they misdirect the sales team and they don't truly understand the most cost-effective solution or use of the sales team that's in place?
Yes, in many cases, even if there was no change in the market, because of the misunderstanding of what the sales team actually do and how they do it, selling can be to a lot of business owners and boards a bit of a dark art, and they don't really know what goes on.
There's a lot of dark arts out there in business.
There are.
But you're right, this is another one, isn't it?
It is. So, a question we're often asked, and you kind of alluded it to earlier about, is it an art or is it a science?
Yes.
And obviously there is some art involved, but largely speaking, you can apply science to the process to optimise a result from a salesperson. But at board level, it tends to be largely misunderstood. That's the problem.
So then, are there any tools? I mean, we sometimes talk about sales being the cornerstone of any business. So you've got R&D, research, maybe product development, product supply, but sales, though, being all these things being a cornerstone.
Yeah.
Are there things that you should follow for successful sales management? Are there rules? Are there key strategies that you should consider?
First of all, if one looks at a salesperson and you consider some of the other things you mentioned there around research and development, advertising, pricing, policy, product range, and what have you, but none of those are actually unique. Your salespeople are. We haven't got cloning going on yet, so every single member of your sales team is unique, and therefore you have a unique selling point and a point of differentiation that you cannot achieve with the rest of the marketing mix, if you like, in terms of product and advertising, those things. So I think a recognition that salesperson is in fact a unique resource, and one that should be led accordingly and motivated accordingly. Now, if you take that as a given, how do you do that? What an organisation needs to do, and I mentioned earlier about planning of activity rather than trying to manage by results, is just going to handle on three fairly straightforward dimensions that produce, or things that produce, sales results. One is the quantity of sales effort that needs to happen. Right? So clearly, if somebody doesn't see any customers, it's unlikely that they're going to actually get a sales result. Secondly, how they spend that effort as well, because you could go and have 20 meetings with the wrong people at the wrong level, selling the wrong thing, and you're not likely to get the result that you want.
Yep, we've all had those. Yep.
But thirdly, if you've got a good plan, you're doing enough of it and doing enough of the right things, what's the quality of the job you do when you get there?
Right.
So what should the sales process be in terms of preparing for the call? What should the process be in terms of opening the call? And then what needs to happen during that meeting to lead to a successful outcome? So quantity, direction and quality, I think.
Oh, you keep throwing things at me in here. So quantity,
direction and quality
are very important.
That's what needs to be managed, and that's what needs to be motivated within a B2B sales team.
Because a lot of people will look at sales and they think it is purely a numbers game, don't they? They think if you bang on enough doors as often as you possibly can, you're going to make sales out of it. I'm sure that probably in some instances is indeed the case. But if it's structured like this, where you've got that activity, that proper time management, and then the quality of that close at the end.
But it needs to be planned, and obviously, if you double the amount of sales calls that you do, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to double the business that you do, because direction and quality is important as well. But if you just take that quantity point for a moment, every salesperson should have a handle on, right, how many meetings do I need?
They should know that.
How many new leads do I need? And often when I ask that at board level, or when we ask that at board level, the response we get is, we've got a good handle on that, because we set everybody a target of 12 a week.
Well, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll talk more about how the salespeople tick and what they should be looking at, those metrics, in just a moment on this edition of Business Connections Live with my guest, Jeff Downs, Managing Director of Quantum Sales. It's good to have you with us. We're live on a Monday, as we always are. Great discussion there. And I think in the past we've talked a lot about sales in the past, and there are so many different aspects, there are so many different experts out there. But I think it was important today to bring somebody in that was actually looking at it from the perspective of the board, because yes, we can give sales, you can always give sales advice, you can always tell somebody to do it this way, that way, talk this particular way, say these particular things, feel the customer's pain, all those kind of things. But what we're saying here is it's that appreciation that the board's going to have of what that salesperson, that individual is actually doing, and maybe what the KPIs, the metrics are that salesperson has to achieve to maybe, so that you've got some measure of the way that they're working. It was interesting what you're saying there. That does more. Actually, in your, this is kind of off the cuff now, but in your experience, does more sales calls normally generate a significant amount of more sales?
Normally, and the reason for that is you very quickly work out what good looks like, and from quantity you get quality. So you improve your number of chances, and then you become more rigorous in your qualification, and you become then more focused. So
this is going back to that old adage about a no has a value. Even if you're doing 100 calls, if you're doing 100 calls and you're getting 99 no's, each one of those no's has a value, because it all adds up to a yes. Eventually.
Yeah, I would say though that one should learn from what actually happens, and on a piece of business that you don't win, to actually do some sort of post-mortem, so that actually what happened here, what was its probability in the first place, and that can be broken down very scientifically into all the factors that represent the likelihood of you winning a piece of business.
Well, what we'll do, we'll talk about that and also how the salesman ticks in just a few moments' time. I suppose it is, to a lot of the time, it's all down to presentation and the way you present yourself. And you may find that in a number of instances, you find yourself standing up there, maybe doing a sales presentation, or maybe a keynote, or maybe just, thinking through a series of ideas in front of an internal sales team. Presentation techniques are truly very, very important. I think there's a quote somewhere that says most people would rather die than actually give a presentation or speak in public. We had Paul Ryan on the programme a little while back, and it kind of ties in with what we're talking about today. Paul Ryan is actually a presentation coach, so he will take people aside and he will teach them the best way, and the best way to actually present their ideas and their presentations. It was a cracking show. Just a little bit of advice that will fit in nicely with maybe the whole world of sales. Just to give you a bit of a taste there, here's Paul Ryan. Hello, Paul.
If you're going to give a presentation, what you're probably going to find is that your nerves will kick in long before you get up on your feet. So something that we didn't discuss in the programme, but I want you to use, is a positive affirmation. Often we talk ourselves down. We will say, oh, God, I hate giving presentations. I'm rubbish at giving presentations. It's going to be terrible. And it's the old Henry Ford thing. If you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. The brain is an incredibly powerful tool, and what I want you to do is stop those negative thoughts in their tracks by thinking something positive. So I will always say to myself, for example, and we all get it, I was saying to Steve earlier, you know, coming on this show, I get nervous a little bit, but I'm using the tools and techniques that I want you to use now to put me in a really positive state of mind. So when I was waiting to come in, I used my positive affirmation, which was, I am sharp, polished and professional. I'm sharp, polished and professional. That stops all the negative monkey mind chatter in its tracks with a positive affirmation, a statement of something which is true. Okay, because I am pretty good at what I do, I am professional and I am focused. By telling myself that, that's what I'm going to feel. So before you get up to give your presentation, choose a new positive affirmation and repeat it to yourself. It must be in the now, not I will give a great presentation, because will is always in the future, but I give a strong, clear presentation. I enjoy the presentation that I'm giving. Those kind of things. Is that enough for you, Steve?
Absolutely, Paul. More than enough, in fact. Paul Ryan there, talking about presentation techniques. Great show to watch, by the way, and really informative. And you can see Paul Ryan on a DFS ad near you on your TV screens. He does a lot of those, actually, a professional actor, and he does an incredible Kenneth Williams as well. Matron, no. Do watch the entire show. Not only is it an informative show, but it's also very entertaining as well. Incidentally, if you would like a show like this one, don't forget, do drop us a line, email studio@businessconnectionslive.com, or if you wish to give us a ring on the dog and bone, 01784 256 777. You're watching Business Connections Live. Great to have your company with us today. My guest on today's show is Jeff Downs. He's the Managing Director of Quantum Sales. They effectively are a business that goes in and they will help organisations sort out their B2B sales strategy. Identifies what the sales team should be doing, what the board should be doing to encourage the sales, what the board should expect and how they can motivate the sales team to get the maximum return, that ROI on their investment into them. Identifying as well what they should be doing with the sales team and also the talents within their sales team as well, for that matter. Let's talk a little bit more. We were kind of alluding to what makes a salesman tick. Surely what makes a salesman tick is money, isn't it?
Well, apparently not, but that's the biggest myth and the biggest assumption around, and survey after survey shows that, you know, in a list of 8 motivational factors, actually money on average is third from the bottom.
Really?
Yes.
So what's the big one then?
So the big ones tend to be things like achievement, recognition and praise, job content, actually enjoying the job itself, working with a team, a whole number of things that actually nothing to do with money. Money is a nice reinforcer for salespeople, but it's unlikely to sustainably motivate somebody towards a goal.
So is that feeling of success then, that feeling of achievement, that is the thing that they
very often
that they're looking for?
So therefore, the job of sales leadership is to build in as much winning into the job as possible.
Do we sometimes get a little bit lost in that, where because here we're talking about, I suppose, incentives to a certain extent, are we?
Well, organisations often lean on incentives, thinking that's going to change the behaviour. And actually what normally happens is it doesn't change the behaviour, it just rewards the people who are going to be successful anyway, and, you know, actually produces resentment because they're off on the Caribbean holiday again whilst everybody else is, you know, trying their best and not earning at the same level.
So obviously you've come into organisations and you've seen that happen. How do you change that when you're talking to the CEO or the sales director or the sales manager? What's the advice you would then give to a business? How do you motivate globally the team, not just individuals but the entire team?
Well, this is where the role of sales leadership is so important. First, we have to make sure we, for want of a better term, educate the sales management team around what makes human beings tick, what they need to do to be a good leader. What do they need to do is make sure they do understand what the switches are for each of their salespeople, recognising that everybody is different and that some things change over time as well.
And is there a strategy for identifying what that is?
Well, the strategy is it's their job.
All right, okay.
They should be understanding the individual, understand how their current job fits in with their overall plan, if you like, their life plan, their goals and what have you, and then work out how, the things they need to achieve in their job to be able to tick those higher level boxes as well. As
you go into large blue chip organisations, large companies, do you come across the old thing, the Peter principle, where everybody's been promoted to their level of incompetence? So you'll have a successful salesperson who, because he's successful at sales, is then promoted and promoted and promoted till eventually he becomes the sales manager. And maybe even the sales director, and he's now actually a fish out of water because he no longer has the skills for that position. Is that difficult to educate them so they understand that they now have to learn new skills?
Well, first of all, one of the most common mistakes that senior management makes is that thing of promoting your most successful salesperson automatically into a sales management role. And the skill sets are actually different. So that's number one. Number two, if somebody can't go into a sales management role, what are the alternatives for them? So is there a career path within the organisation for them to progress, maybe into a major account role, maybe into some other role in the organisation, or maybe actually a role outside of the organisation as well, and just managing that.
So for a salesperson, can it sometimes be, in career progression, can it be slightly limiting sometimes? Well, either they can earn lots of money as being a senior salesperson, but not in a management role.
Yes, I think managing that is very, very important, that people need to really, with their manager, work out what is it that they really want as their next step. And the people who really want it will often take a salary cut or a package cut to go and do that sales management role, because instead of being rewarded for their individual performance, of course they're being rewarded for the team performance. So sales managers who really want to be sales managers and sales leaders, they're prepared to take that on the chin. But somebody who actually, what they really want to do is go and do lots of selling and earn loads of money, it's a poor fit.
Do you think that large organisations, medium-scale organisations, do we have sales teams or do we have individuals? Is it a group activity or is it an individual activity? And have you come across that where it's caused issues?
Yeah, I think selling is, in most cases, in terms of the individual sales people, it's an individual game. It's almost like, I don't know if you follow golf, but it's like the Ryder Cup. As your team as a whole, but you're playing your individual games. But having said that, with certain types of selling, it's very important for the salesperson or account manager to be the leader of a team within the organisation, managing other resources. So if you look at one of the cornerstones of key account management is assembling a good team to actually work with the customer. Somebody from technical, somebody from finance, maybe somebody from the senior management team. And the salesperson in that role becomes the account manager who has to be the leader of that team of internal people.
Do you think some of this is all down this confusion that we've got in sales is all down to the British disease of the way people get into sales? I know we had a chat about this before we came on air today, but the Americans see being a salesperson, working in sales, as being a true professional profession, if you can have such a thing.
Yes.
So you can be a doctor, you could be a medic, you can be a salesman. Yeah. Whereas over here, the most common thing that because this happened to you as well, I know that, is that people fall into sales and then find they have an inert ability to actually go out and be quite successful at it. Do you think we approach it maybe a bit late and a bit wrong?
Yes, I do, and because it's not a recognised profession, that's the reason why around board tables around the country there's this huge misunderstanding. Therefore, what that person needs to be doing and what they need to look at and what they need to look after. So, if for example it was a lawyer, or like an accountant, there would be a set of parameters that say this is what you need, these are the qualifications that you need to pass to be able to become a successful professional accountant. That doesn't really exist in sales.
It's a tick sheet as well, isn't it? Should we say in law?
Yeah.
And I'm not, I understand, I'm not knocking people that are working in the legal industry, but there is you've got to be very clever, you've got to be very focused, and you've got to understand what you're doing.
Yeah.
But there's always, unless you're coming up with a brand new piece of legislation yourself, it's nearly a tick list. That somebody has done this before somewhere.
Yes.
And it's been aware of that knowledge, whereas a sales call is slightly different, isn't it?
Well, I don't know if it is really. I just think it's not captured in that fashion. So if you was to ask me, what are the steps that would lead towards winning a piece of business, and what the checks and balances, and if you like, what's the way you could calculate the likelihood of winning a piece of business, for example, I would say it's highly structured and highly tick box oriented.
Well, in that case, then I should wash my mouth out, and so there we are. Then, and actually thinking about it, you're probably right. Yes, you are.
Yeah.
All right then. So let's look then about what the prerequisites are for selling value, because not only is it not easy to say, but it's also is it difficult to do as well.
It's very difficult if you're in a competitive market, and if you've got a product or a service that's relatively undifferentiated. The differentiation needs to come through the salesperson. So how are you going to win that piece of business if your price is 10% more expensive, for example? Why would somebody buy it from you? How are you going to win a piece of business if somebody's very comfortable and loyal to an existing provider? How are you going to overcome that? So one way or the other, you have to understand the sources of value for your particular offering, so the product, the service, and you, and engage the customer in that process of why that's valuable to them. And that's when the fun really starts. How do you do that? It's a tough job, particularly when you're looking to win new business, or when you meet a new contact in an existing customer. We need to gain that trust and credibility very, very quickly.
And I take it that how do you explain that then to the board, that that's what the sales team are doing? How do they get their sales team to do that? Is it instructional? Is it training? How do they do that?
Well, it could be training, could be instructional. I would say two things beyond that, which are kind of the kind of obvious things. One is a total board commitment to the value of the offering. So what you often see is a salesperson might be allowed to give 5% discount. If they want 10% discount, they have to go to their manager. If they want 15% discount, they have to go to the director. If they want 20% discount, they have to go to the managing director. Now, what does that do? It reinforces that the higher up you are in the company, the less you believe in the value of your offering. It's nonsense. What should be happening is, throughout the chain of command, if you like, there should be a reinforcement that actually is no discount. If you go to buy 2 Ferraris, you don't get a discount. The quality of the product and service, this is the price, this is the value. Your job, Mr. or Mrs. Salesperson, is to go and sell it. So that's what needs to happen at board level. Secondly, if I go right to the front end now, the sales leader in a coaching role, when they get the question about, can you help me here? If we can just tweak the price a little, we can win this business. They need to get into full-on coaching mode, and to be able to demonstrate to that salesperson how they can sell the price difference rather than give some more discount. So frontline, salespeople in a coaching role are absolutely key to this.
All right, listen, we're going to come back to that. It's interesting. A lot of companies do actually sell on price, or at least that's what some of the sales team do. Should you be doing that? We'll talk more about it in just a few moments' time on this edition of Business Connections Live. My guest on the program today is Jeff Downs. He's the Managing Director of Quantum Sales. As always, he's doing a sterling job sitting there in front of the camera being grilled today. But how would you do? How would you do if somebody was talking to you? Say you're in crisis management, something happens within your organisation, and all of a sudden you've got reporters on your doorstep. How would you go about resolving that? Would you take control of the interview, or would you find yourself in a situation where the interviewer is taking control of you and is putting words into your mouth? How do you make certain the sound bites work properly for you? How do you make certain that you don't start making up company policy on the hoof? We've all seen that, haven't we? We've seen politicians on the TV promise one thing one day and the following day realise what they've said afterwards. How do you go about protecting yourself from that? Well, we run a course here at Business Connections Live called How to Handle the Media. We give you experience of how to handle a TV interview. We give you experience on how to handle a radio phone-in where you've been asked difficult questions, and trust me, we're not easy with you. It will be the worst it could ever be. And then location recordings when you're by the roadside and people are screaming and shouting things at you just to distract you, and you've still got to deliver a clear, concise message about why your organisation are there in the first place, being the spokesperson and being on either TV or radio. How would you handle it? How would you do? Well, as I said, we run the course. It's called How to Handle the Media. We had James Griffin from Iris. He brought his sales team on to one of our training courses. And here's what James said about our training course on how to handle the media.
I'm James Griffin from Iris Software, and my team have just completed the How to Handle the Media workshop. It was a really great course, it was really fun, and it was a really unique way for them to polish their presentation skills and learn how to answer difficult questions under pressure. So I'd highly recommend this to anybody that values those skills and really wants a great day out with their team.
It's a fascinating day, actually. So if you want to get that expertise, that experience, it is as real as it can be. You're sitting here in this multi-camera studio. It's a live studio. Programs go out from here each and every day. And you'll be sitting here. You'll be sitting in a part of the studio that is completely like a radio studio, and you'll be taken through the processes of what to expect, what you shouldn't do, what you should do when it comes to being interviewed by the media. It's a cracking day. If you want more details, here comes all the details for you now. You can email us at studio@businessconnectionslive.com and just put in the heading there that you want to find out more about the How to Handle the Media training courses. Or if you wish, you can give us a telephone call. Maybe you have a particular requirement. All the courses are turnkey anyway, for that matter. They are geared directly to the business that we're talking about. So we use press releases that have been issued by the PR teams. So it is about your business, not coming in talking about something that you know nothing about. So give us a call, have a word. It's 01784 256 777 is our telephone number. Don't forget as well, you can direct message us. That's not easy to say, at BCL Business TV on Twitter, or if you want, you can always follow us, of course, on our Facebook page and get a comment to us that way. But it's a cracking day out. You'll really enjoy it. It's also very good for team building as well, for that matter. You're all working together as a team. It is very much, it's not talk and chalk. It's very much a case of coming in, sitting down and doing, and then as a workshop, everybody discussing how well somebody did, how to improve their performance, what the best bits are from one person's performance, and how somebody else can implement that into the way that they actually go about handling the media. If you want more details, as I said, just contact us here at Business Connections Live. You're watching Business Connections Live. My guest of the day show is Jeff Downs. He's the Managing Director of Quantum Sales. And they've been founded, we'll just have a look and see, working alongside business leaders who are change agents, delivering step change improvements in the performance that they've got out there. It's a good site if you want to find out more details at quantumsales.com. We believe that professional selling is an undervalued and underdeveloped resource that represents an opportunity for companies to improve the quality of sales and sales management, resulting in improved ROI and shareholder value. What's nice about this is it says very much about what you're going to get on the box. It's a cracking site, tells you more about what quantum sales are all about. Been established since 1997. To work with business leaders to drive profitable growth. I mean, that's what it's all about, isn't it?
It is.
And that really is what all sales is all about. It is the growth of your business to make it more profitable. Now, we've got a few more questions for you.
Yeah.
So you're started for 10 then,
yes.
Jeff.
Yeah.
We've kind of talked about the prerequisites and the key skills. When we look at the individual these days, what do you think the key skills are that we need? Is it tenacity? Is it a thick skin? Being able to speak the language, of the business, of the organisation. What do you think the key skills are?
I think they're all the kind of givens. But beyond that, just to explain, a colleague of mine was once asked, what are the most common mistakes that salespeople make? And he said that there's two key ones that are most common. One is that they fail to open a meeting professionally and effectively.
So what does that mean?
Okay, so what that means is us human beings, when we meet somebody for the first time, it's a matter of seconds that person forms an impression of us. So in terms of how we look, how we feel to the other person as well, in terms of our confidence, our professionalism, and most importantly, the other person is thinking, can I do business with this person? Can I trust them?
And they actually do make up their mind in a few microseconds.
Microseconds, they do. It's a sort of primal response that we all have. If somebody comes to the cave door, friend or foe.
Mm-hmm. Is there ever an opportunity, do you think, in your experience, to retrieve that situation if you get it wrong?
Very difficult. You can, but it probably takes about 10 times as much effort as getting it right in the first place. So putting more care into the way you step into the building, even arrive at the car park actually, because sometimes people are looking outside their glass window on their on their corner office and seeing you arrive and see what you do there, but right through reception into the meeting room, the greeting, the handshake, the swapping of cards, the whole positioning of the meeting can be done very effectively in 5 minutes, or it can be a complete disaster. My colleague calls it the biggest missed opportunity in professional selling. So there's many simple things that we can do to get it right and to build that platform.
So are there any more tips? Because that is fascinating, the whole psychology of that.
Yes.
Absolutely fascinates me. So that's the first big mistake. What are the others?
The other one is simply pitching too early. So in other words, presenting the product in one form or another, could be a written form, could be PowerPoint slides, could be just verbal explanation, before understanding the customer's needs and wants, where their pain is, where their pleasure is. And that the problem is with a lot of salespeople is that they are very enthusiastic, understandably, and so they should be, about their product and their service, but they don't take enough time to develop the conversation with the customer first of all.
Is this going back to this old adage about ABC, always be closing, do you think?
Well, I think in a sense, it's that it's the antipathy of that adage. Don't be closing until you've understood there is a good fit between what the customer perceives they need and they agree they need, and what you have actually got to bring to the party for them. And the key to it is first of all, know what's in your briefcase. Before the customer knows, what are your value adds? How can you, in that kind of business, for that particular prospect, where and how are you going to add value? That's step one. But from that, don't go into a pitch. Plan the questions that you're going to ask to engage the customer in that thinking. And most salespeople either don't do that hardly at all, or they do 10 minutes of it when they meet somebody for the first time and think somehow that that's enough. And salespeople kind of need to recognise that the state of mind of the person they're selling to could be anything from, I need one of these, give me your price and tell me how you're different, to I've got a problem, I don't know how I'm going to go about it, to do you know what, I'm seeing you today but I don't know why I'm seeing you, I just thought you sounded quite an affable person, so I thought I'd meet you, but we're quite happy actually.
A bit of advice that was given by one of our other guests a couple of weeks back was that to send nearly a form in prior to the meeting that kind of that is asking for what the pain points are, so there's already been some engagement prior to the sales call.
Well, I wouldn't want to dismiss that idea, but I think it is.
It's just politely.
No, not at all. It's to do with context. If you're talking to a buyer who said, "Look, I've got these issues I need to solve," I'm quite happy to give you a sort of heads up on that before we meet, just to get the thought process going. I think that's fine. But the problem is they've given probably the same brief to 5 other competitors as well. So very often the nature of the face-to-face conversation is trying to get the customer thinking about not just the reasons they want to buy, but why they want to buy from you. And that's back to my point about know what's in your briefcase, know where your differentiators are, because that's how you can sell the value.
I knew a sales manager once, and he would send his sales team out and they would have 3 different contracts in their case, depending on the outcome of the way the conversation went.
Yes.
So he was prepared for all eventualities.
Yes.
But I suppose it's all down to preparation, isn't it?
Well, let's pick up on that point. I think it is. In terms of, again, common errors that we see, again, many salespeople don't do any planning going into the call. So there's no pre-call plan or even a thought process, or maybe it's in the taxi just thinking about a few things, rather than working out what is it they want to achieve from the call. And when we ask that question when we go out with salespeople, okay, what's the objective of the call? It's a discovery call, fact finding. So no, what's the objective? What customer commitment do you want by the end of the meeting? And in some cases, I'd like an order where that's possible. And in many B2B situations, that's not possible. So if it's not possible, what do you actually want to gain commitment to by the end of the call? And they don't think about that. And yet, probably they should be thinking about, probably the next thing I need is another meeting. And I need this person's colleague with me. I need to talk to the technical director as well, or maybe the sales director, or maybe somebody in the production area. And they don't think about that. So they go in, and what's the old saying? If you don't know where you're going, you can catch any bus to get there. Somebody once told me.
Yes, indeed.
And that's kind of what happens. So there's no pre-call plan, and then therefore there's no post-call analysis. So if they're being coached by me or their sales manager, maybe, what are we comparing it with?
Do you know? Surprisingly, the hour has flown by practically, and there's still oodles and oodles to talk about.
Yeah.
In 30 seconds, could you sum up the ingredients of a good sales activity? It's really what you've just been saying, isn't it?
Yeah.
Plan the sales call.
Yeah.
Identify what you want to actually achieve out of it before going in there, and then that's the key to it all, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is. I think there needs to be clarity at board level about what you want from your sales team. At a sales management level, you need a good grip on the management of sales activity, quantity, direction and quality. And with regard to quality, you need to have a regime in place that develops the quality of those frontline salespeople, which usually means, probably a bit of training, but you know what, mostly coaching every single day.
Well, I'm going to ask you, Nearly, in many respects, to repeat some of the things you said. At the end of every program, we invite our guests to do just a minute or a couple of minutes down the camera lens with the key takeaways that we all need to remember when it comes to, from board all the way down to sales, what we should be remembering. Would you be okay doing that?
Yeah, sure.
If you say who you are, where you're from, if you look straight down camera number 1 over there, that'd be great. Take a breath. The airwaves are all yours, Jeff.
I'm Jeff Downs. I'm the Managing Director of Quantum Sales. We've been working with selling operations in the B2B space over the last 25 years, and we've been helping to improve sales in terms of growing sales, in terms of growing profitable sales, and getting sales teams to sell value. In terms of the way we go about that, I think the most important points are at board level, be clear about what you want from your sales team in terms of the results that they have to bring in, the value that they add. That might be to do with customers, products, levels of profitability and growth. And then at a sales management level, make sure that you've got sales leaders who can motivate their salespeople, who can understand each individual and how they're different and what style of management needs to be used with them. And importantly, have the machinery in place to be able to manage sales activity in terms of the quantity, direction and quality of that activity. And then at the front end, recognise that if salespeople are going to produce ongoing improved results and fulfil their potential, they will need good quality coaching. So don't have your sales managers staring into a computer or working out the numbers from the CRM system. Have them out there 60% of the time coaching their salespeople.
Fantastic. So there we have it. Take those tips away from Jeff today, and perhaps that's going to actually put you in a position where your organisation is going to be functioning a little bit better. And there is always this disconnect that we said sometimes what happens at board level doesn't filter its way down to sales level. And you know, everybody at the end of the day is all working for the same organisation, and everybody should have potentially the same aims in life, shouldn't they?
They should.
Listen, it's been an absolute pleasure having you with us. Don't forget, if you want to find out more about Jeff and also Quantum Sales for that matter, simply go to their website and you'll find them at www.quantum-sales.com, and you get all the information about what they can do, and perhaps maybe they could actually help your particular organisation when it comes to improving your sales performance with your sales team, and also the understanding that the board have. Jeff, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for being on this edition of Business Connections Live.
Thank you.
And there we go, just the housekeeping to do before we run away and we all go home on this Monday lunchtime. Next week's show is looking absolutely fascinating. Our guest next week is going to be Theodore Gray, Business Solutions Manager from Oxford Innovation, talking about advice about financial management and helping business owners to make the most of what they have, and we all need to be doing that. Future programmes, Mark Tillison, MD of Tillison's Consulting and Digital Marketing Agency, Deborah Hulme, Director of Minerva Engagements, going to be with us, James Potter, the LinkedIn man, I like that, the LinkedIn man, is going to be joining us on the program as well. Don't forget, if you'd like to sponsor the program, then you can do that. Just get in touch with us here at Business Connections Live. And if you're watching us in the Cambridge area, then it is Freeview Channel 8 and Virgin 159. But that wraps up today's program. Thank you very much, Jeff, once again for coming in on the program. And thank you for watching. We'll do it all again next Monday when we're live for another edition of Business Connections Live. Bye for now. Bye-bye.